Welcome to this week's conversation in our series of conversations with women of significance in STEM leadership. And I am Leah Zallens and I'm the host today. And my background is originally in biochemistry and then a career in sales, primarily in medical technology. And today I work in leader development, specifically with women developing careers in the science and technology market. And as we know, there is a growing shortage of STEM trained professionals that need to take up the roles in data science, in engineering, in technology. And there's also a growing gap in the number of girls coming in and choosing science and technology education and careers. So there is still big gaps in the boardroom, in the C-suite, in a professorship, in government, and we want to be bridging that gap and encouraging more girls to choose science and technology education and careers, and to help them to stay there long enough so they can become the leaders that we need them to be, to start bridging some of those gaps, whether it be the pay gap, the racial gap, the gender gap. There are so many gaps in this industry. So these series of conversations are about looking into the strategies and the mindset of women who are creating success in science and technology roles in spite of these biases and barriers that we're seeing that are stopping a lot of women from making these choices to come into science and technology. So today we have with us Professor Didar Zowghi. Welcome, Didar.
Thank you.
Didar, so you are the Professor of Software Engineering and the Deputy Dean of the Graduate Research School at UTS. And so today, thank you for your time. And I'm very curious to ask you to share a little bit of your career story, a little bit about how you've come to be doing what you're doing, and indeed, what is the nature of that work and what problem does that solve?
Thank you, Leah. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess I have a very long story to give, but I have to try and give it as briefly as I can. I was born in a family of 5 children in Iran, and I finished my high school in Iran. This was post-Islamic Revolution, and I was taken to the United Kingdom with my mom to study and go to university. And my family was very keen and very serious about education, perhaps due to our religious background. We are from a minority religious group from Iran, members of the Baha'i faith. And also both my parents have studied science at school, and my father was an accountant, and my mother, before she started the family, was a teacher. So they were very keen for their children to be educated, and they made a lot of sacrifices to send us to the best schools in Iran. And when I went to England, I actually wanted to study engineering because I liked to make things, and I liked to take things apart and find out what is inside them from childhood. And I always thought that, engineering was a really, really good career. And my oldest sister was already studying engineering in the top university in Iran when I left Iran. My second sister was studying accounting and a branch of mathematics, I guess. And also, I think we were going through the time in Iran, in the time of the former king in Iran, that there was a lot of emphasis put on education as well. So culturally, religiously, education was extremely important for all of us. And I got into studying mathematics branch of studies in school. And I was really good at maths always. I loved maths, and I had very good teachers. And overall, I never really felt there was anything else other than mathematics for me. And so when I went to England, it was just the beginning of computer science. And the college that I entered have just acquired a computer, and they were offering computer science as a subject. So I studied mathematics and computer science in college, and in fact entered University of Essex in Colchester to study electrical engineering to begin with. But after the first year, which was a common set for all the students entering, I realized that I prefer to do computer science because it was more about problem solving at a more analytical and conceptual level rather than the engineering side. So I moved to computer science then, and I became fascinated with computers and all the analytical side of it. And so when I finished my degree, I entered industry. I worked first as a programmer, then as an analyst and a project manager. And then a revolution happened in Iran. And for us Baha'is, it was impossible to go back to Iran because Baha'is were being persecuted and continue to be persecuted in Iran. So we couldn't go back. And so we decided to come to Australia in the early 80s. And in Australia, again, I continued working in industry for a while. And then I got married and started a family. And in those days, it was impossible to continue working if you didn't want to leave your child to childcare. I ended up doing some part-time teaching at Macquarie University, which was across the road where I lived. And then I was approached by one of the professors there one day to say that, why don't you continue your studies? And I said, he said, do you want to do some research? I have some scholarship I can give if you want to study and do some research. And so I started doing part-time master's by research degree at Macquarie University. And then in the middle of that, I had my second child. Then after I finished my master's, I was offered a lectureship at the University of Western Sydney, which had just been formed in those days. And so I worked as a lecturer at the University of Western Sydney in computer science for about 3 years. And I realized that for me to continue to grow and to go up in the academic hierarchy, I have to have a PhD. So I was looking for opportunities, and then I was offered a scholarship at Macquarie University Joint Research Center for Advanced Systems Engineering to do a PhD. And so I took leave without pay from my work from Western Sydney and did my PhD while raising 2 kids at Macquarie University. And when I finished my degree, Macquarie offered me a lectureship position. So I moved to Macquarie and I worked there for another couple of years, 3 years. And then I was offered senior lectureship at UTS. So I came to UTS in 2000, and I've been there for 20 years. And I've been a professor for 11 years now, Deputy Dean of Graduate Research School for 1 year. This is a secondment. So I still hold my substantive position as Professor of Software Engineering. And you said at the beginning that there aren't that many. In fact, only about 5% of people who enter academia become professors. And among them, very few female in the STEM field as well. So it's been a long and hard road, but definitely worth it.
So what would you say would be your biggest challenge, Didar? Because it sounds like you've been very single-minded. I know you've been very succinct, actually, at giving us a beautiful helicopter ride through your life. I was just with you all the way. Thank you for that. And so I know it was not just smooth sailing all the way, but what I am hearing that you recognized very early what you were curious about.
Yeah.
And one thing you said, maths was the only path for me. So I wonder if there's an element of single-mindedness that is a strong trait of yours that has helped you to be recognized by the professor who suggested or asked you, would you like to do more research? Clearly, they saw that there was potential and that could be a good career path for you. So the single-mindedness, the work ethic, clearly being able to juggle your PhD and 2 children. Who does that? Who does that?
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you know, because
Yeah.
the demands of that and the personal growth through that journey and the single-mindedness of your work ethic there. But did you have any difficulties being, like, were you the only woman in the room? I mean, did you experience biases, for example?
I have to admit that, so going back to the first point about single-mindedness, I think you're correct in saying that. And I think I was raised by a mother who also was a very, very determined mother. And she was denied university education because her generation, women would just get married. And she actually studied hell of a lot more than her siblings and her peers did. So she had great ambitions for all of us. And so there was four girls, and the youngest one was a son. And all of us went to university, did our best. In her psyche, sloth was not acceptable. You just had to be useful and doing something useful all the time. And so determination, and you were not allowed to quit. There was no quitting. So you start something, you have to finish it. And so, and so those were the kind of upbringing that I had. And
so much more task focused, outcomes focused,
yes,
productivity, be useful,
yeah,
be deliberate,
yes,
and just stay on path until you get there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So determination was, you know, built in our psyche from the beginning, and all my siblings are the same. And so then we come to challenges you asked me. I think that perhaps I can say the biggest challenge to begin with for me was to leave the comforts of my home country at the age of 18 and not knowing a single word of English, not knowing the language, to go to the UK and be determined to enter university and finish a university education. So that first 6 months, while I was trying to learn some English to converse with people, as well as studying, of course, maths was okay because maths has its own language. I didn't need language for maths, but for computer science and for even just learning about the culture, about the surroundings was a huge challenge for me. And then I think the second challenge was for me, actually coming to Australia wasn't so much of a challenge. In fact, when I arrived in Australia, I kind of felt right at home, and I thought, yeah, this is home. I really love it here. And I just really loved the people, the environment, everything there was. Whereas in England, I was quite unhappy because I really wasn't happy at all about my surroundings, but I was studying. I was determined to finish my degree, to find a job and do what I was supposed to be doing. And I actually was the recipient of a lot of prejudice, racial prejudice in England, and being laughed at by a lot of college mates and my classmates, and being ridiculed many times, you know, for having a bad accent or not being able to converse. So I experienced all of that in England.
And how did you deal with that?
Oh, just press on. You're here to stay. I'm here to stay. You're not gonna make me go back. And of course, in 1979, the revolution happened. There were no bridges behind us to go back. So we were here to stay. We were there to succeed. We had to find a way. And just block it out of your mind and just leave it. Think about that this is ignorance. Prejudice comes from ignorance, in my opinion. And but then when I came to Australia, I really didn't experience that. So sometimes when people tell me, oh, you know, there is racial prejudice in Australia, and I say, look, I haven't experienced it, honestly. And they say, oh, yeah, because you've always been at university, you've been with a certain elite group of people, and you have, but I honestly, I think that Australia is a very different society. It's multicultural, very different. And so I was quite okay with that. And then I think my other biggest challenge in life was to find the work-home balance when I was raising 2 children and doing a PhD. And I look back sometimes these days and I wonder, how did I do that? I think that I felt I was on autopilot, just getting up every morning and these are the tasks you have to do and you got to do them. And I think I always put my children first. So I think biggest challenges came when they were not well and I had to look after them, and there were deadlines to meet, and many, many sleepless nights. And I remember that my whole life was regimented and a routine, that do all the work for the kids, put them to bed, spend 4 hours on your thesis, go to bed midnight, wake up at 7 o'clock, all over again. And this just went on for 3-4 years until I completed my PhD. And I never forget the time that I had to spend to write my thesis, and it was quite challenging for me. When I came to UTS, actually, I should also say this, that maybe this would answer your next question about role models, but I really didn't have many female role models other than looking up to my mom and then my older sisters, who were both determined and doing their work. And then the only really role model in profession that I had was Professor Jenny Edwards at UTS. And when I arrived, she actually interviewed me for the job. She gave me the job. And I, in fact, applied for that job because I went to the website of UTS and I saw that there was something called Women in Computer Science, Women in Computing. And there was a picture of Jenny. Jenny was the head of school at that time. She was associate professor then. And she's very well known in the computing circles. And I actually accepted the job because of her, because I thought I will have a female boss and I can look up to her. And she also was extremely supportive. She mentored me all through my career. She's retired now, but all the time I always looked up to her. I wanted to be like Jenny Edwards. And she was very hardworking, very determined, also extremely caring and supporting, mentoring so many people in UTS, not just female, also male. And so it really was a pleasure to have her in my academic career as a role model. And so there was also quite a lot of challenges I faced in academia, because there was always a token female, me. I used to be called to sit on selection committees for recruitment because they needed to have for EEO a female. So yeah, I contributed, and I felt that I was actually helping my female fellow colleagues to rise in their challenges. And I have mentored a lot of female as well as male colleagues in their promotions and in their careers over the years, basically following the footsteps of Jenny and trying to do what she used to do.
Yes, and that pathway, it has been shown that studying role models is the fastest way to develop yourself. And as you say, there's an element, I want to be like her, but it's not that you want to become exactly as she is. It's more about how she's doing what she's doing.
Yeah.
And also I'm hearing reciprocity as well. You gain so much from being mentored by somebody else. And so the natural flow on is for you to want to give back to others. And this is that human element of reciprocity that is so important. And I think it is one element that as women, we can do extremely well.
Yeah.
I'm hearing very much be clear on the task, be clear on the outcome, and set your mind on that, and let the prejudices and let the challenges and let the difficulties be. And and I'm hearing that this was over sustained periods of time that you were tolerating difficulties. It wasn't just a one-off thing. And then you had 4 years of a PhD juggling young children.
Yeah, I think that
all of that.
You're absolutely right, because even in my home country, because I was member of a minority religious group, we were always othered, and always at school. I mean, you talk about bias. I experienced a lot of prejudice in my own home country, at school, in the environment, and so many, I don't want to go through it. And you can go and study and see what Baha'is have been through in Iran, and are continue to be through. So in terms of giving back, I can tell you that this has been really a cornerstone of my life. For example, in the last 10 to 15 years, I have been teaching Baha'i students in Iran online because they are denied of going to university. They have been denied university education for 30 years. And So I do this in my spare time, and I feel so good about this because I can give back something to my home country, to people who are being denied education. And the other thing I was thinking about retrospectively, as you said, something that I have tried to do in my life is to learn from mistakes and to also watch what mistakes people are making and not make their mistakes. So I can start by perhaps looking, there was some things, as we always, I think all people find something that they don't like about what their mother is doing. And so if there was something that I didn't like that my mom was doing, I tried not to do that for my children. And then when I was being supervised for my PhD by my supervisor, I came across many things that I felt were wrong. And I made a note, mental note of this. And I kept telling myself that when I become a supervisor for a PhD student, I will not do these things. And I have made a very, very conscious effort of not doing the mistakes of others and learning from my own mistakes and not do them again. And I think this has helped me a lot in moving forward and putting things in the back there.
And so this is the multitasking as well. Again, which women, we are good at multitasking. So you're able to be task focused and yet still be very aware of what's going on in your environment and very aware about what other people are doing without necessarily getting lost in what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because this is what I see is it's a fantastic trait if it's something that has been inbuilt in you, as you say, from your upbringing. You had very strong outcomes focused direction, particularly from your mother. And so that's helped you to develop that as a core value. And clearly that is a core value to you, because if it wasn't, you would be rebelling against that.
Oh, absolutely. And I was a very rebellious child, actually. I was, and very defiant, and I wanted to do my own things. But at the end of the day, I look back and I think that I'm so glad that I had a mother like that who honed me into the right direction and didn't let me too much defiance and too much disturbance, and sort of helped me follow my educational dreams. And it's really hard when you look back, you don't know where you're going to end up. If you asked me when I was 18 years old, where are you going to be when you're this age, I wouldn't be able to tell. But I knew that I wanted to have a career and I wanted to have a profession. And my father was very determined for all of us to have a profession, especially because we were girls and we were brought up in a society where it was only just beginning to manifest itself that it is not true that the place of women is in the house. And we religiously believed in equality of the women and men. And my father was very adamant that every single daughter of his should have a profession of herself. And he used to tell me why he thinks like that. He says that, look, one day you will get married, and if something goes wrong in your marriage, I don't want you to stay in a marriage because you financially are dependent on somebody else. I want every daughter of mine to be financially independent and have a career so that they don't have to put up with nonsense. And this was his determination, that every daughter has to be highly educated. And thank God we all are. And we never had to deal with what he said we should, but
yes, having those ideals and those values and the support, as you say, they sacrificed a lot to give you the next level of education and opportunity. So in terms of your work today, is there something you wish you had have known that would have helped you deal with things better or accelerate your career even further and faster, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I've often thought about that. And I mean, when I entered academia, to be honest, I entered academia for the convenience of being able to have flexible time to raise my children alongside, something that I couldn't do if I was in industry in those days. When I entered academia, I didn't even know whether I'll be a good teacher because I've never had teacher training. but I learned along the side. And I think going back, I know now that I have always been an autodidact. That means I have been able to teach myself to do things in many, many stages of my life. So many different things I have taught myself, and I taught myself how to teach as well. And I developed my teaching over the years, and I learned from my colleagues, learned from my role models, and all of that. Now, when I look back, when you enter academia, you realize that the top position you can have is professor. And I remember I also had a male mentor that I should mention, because often this gets lost in this role modeling business of female role model and all of that. But when I entered UTS, I also had a mentor, a male mentor, who also was a professor, the late Professor John Hughes. And I remember that he used to come and have coffee with me every now and then. And one day, I was senior lecturer then, and I asked him, John, do you think I have it in me to become a professor one day? Because I didn't know that I can. I just didn't know what it takes to become a professor. And he looked at me and smiled. He had a beautiful smile. And he said, Didar, look around you and check each one of the professors that we have in the faculty, and go and look at their details, check their career details, and see what have they done to become professor. Of course you can. And he told me that I see that you will be a professor much sooner than they did. And this gave me a lot of encouragement to go and check and see what have they doing that they got professor, and what does it take to become a professor. Of course, a lot of hard work, a lot of determination.
What else do you think does it take to become a professor? Hard work, determination?
Well, I think that's you need to have lots of really creative ideas, because you have to produce high quality research outputs. You have to become a good teacher. So I'm a balanced academic, as we say in academia. There are two types of professors in academia. There are those who are balanced academics, who have always done teaching, research, service to community, contribution to the university. And then there are research-only professors who only do research. They don't do any teaching. They don't do any service to the university. And I've been a regular balanced academic from day one. And so I have had to be the best teacher I can be, the best researcher I can be, contribute as much as I can. So I put my hand up whenever there was a need. So this idea that we had from childhood, that we have to be useful and contribute to society and be service oriented, it was very in line with what you need to do at university. You have to give. It's not take. You have to give back. And so this really resonated with my upbringing and with my personality. And I think looking back, and I became a full professor 7 years after I finished my PhD, which is quite an amazing.
That's very fast.
Yeah, but a lot of working and long hours, very little sleep. And of course, I was still raising my children then as I was going through this. But I think one thing that I think I wasn't very good at in early days was about learning and understanding the politics of academia. Academia has its own politics, and if you don't learn it and if you don't become good at it, then you can actually get hurt by it, because there is a lot of politics in the background all the time. And I held a lot of leadership positions, because to become professor, you have to show leadership. And
yes, and I wanted to draw out the parallels of those traits and focal points of determination and the teaching and the learning and the research and the contribution. The research element, I think that is something that is not as widely perhaps understood as a high value activity. And that is the piece, I think, that STEM educated and trained professional scientists and leaders like yourself, where you've navigated and led and held that leadership position in many facets for numerous years now, it is absolutely women like yourself that we need in those C-level roles in industry, in boardrooms, in government. And I think it's specifically that research aspect, that servant leader, the love of teaching and mentoring others. They are not typical traits of corporate leaders. So this is what I'm enjoying, getting to know a little bit about you and hearing about the person behind the role, because there's so much more to explore and to reflect on and share with the world. Because
it's true.
Yeah.
So I mean, in terms of leadership, I think that as I was growing in the academia, this whole idea of academic leadership was always ill-defined and wasn't, as you said, that there is so much that you do as an academic. And in terms of research, personally, I've always been very serendipitous researcher and opportunistic researcher, in the sense that I have not followed just one research topic or one research discipline. I have looked around. I've had a very broad focus in software engineering, and I have supervised many PhD students whose research was not particularly aligned with my core research. So I have followed my own core research in the software requirements and user needs and all of that. But then I have also been very serendipitous in terms of looking around. I've been very, very collaborative. So one thing that I'm really proud of is that I have co-authored papers with so many people from so many different countries. I've lost count of them these days. Whenever I have shared my ideas with colleagues and they have become interested in it, we have forged ahead and followed that research topic and developed some ideas and produced really nice research and published it in high quality outlets. And then somebody else comes and knocks on my door and says, "Hey, Didar, do you want to come and work with me on this research problem?" And I said, "Oh, okay, tell me a bit more about it." And then I get excited. So I have this desire to look at different things. I don't really want to just look at one research problem for the rest of my life. A lot of my colleague professors have done that. And maybe in terms of citations and research output, they've done better than me. But I have enjoyed my research so much more because I think I've done variety of research topics in different fields. So, for example, multidisciplinary research. I have researched with social scientists, with education professors, with political scientists, with anthropologists, with psychologists, with health professionals, and anybody else who comes and talks to me about technology in a different field. I kind of get excited about it and say, "Oh, okay, let's explore."
So what you've done is you have listened to what makes you happy and what gives you joy, and you found a way to bring that into your work environment as opposed to being funneled down one path.
Yeah.
We didn't get to your answer for what you would tell your younger self, something that you know now that you wish you had have known, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I can tell you a couple of things. One is about choosing your PhD supervisor. So if I had known what I know now when I was choosing my PhD topic or PhD supervisor, I would have been in a different place. And I think that nowadays, if anybody comes to my room and says, "I want to do PhD with you," I'll ask them a whole bunch of questions, but then I tell them, "You should go and ask some questions from my previous PhD students too. You should actually check me out based on human values and where I'm at and what I'm on about before you take me on as supervisor, as well as me doing the same to you." So I didn't do this because I didn't really have the choice. I wanted a scholarship. I wanted to do a PhD. And the first thing that came across my path, I took it. And the second thing regarding career, I think that it is really important to have goals, to have short-term goals and long-term goals. And I remember that I didn't really have this. I was in academia, I had a career, and I wanted to do teaching and research, but until I talked to John, who told me, hey, you will be a professor. Just look around and see what you need to do to become a professor. It didn't click with me. And the other thing that Jenny taught me that I always teach all my colleagues now that I mentor is that keep track of your achievements as you go and compare it with your goals. So where do I want to be and what have I done so far and how much more I have to do to reach my goal. This is something that didn't come to me naturally, and I had to really learn it and be conscious about it all the time. And so this is something I didn't know when I started my career in academia.
And you're right about that, in that some people are more naturally goal oriented,
Yeah.
and it's important to them to set goals and achieve them. There are other people who are more interested in achieving the goal, but it can be somebody else's goal. So you need both elements in a team. But it is interesting what we learn in hindsight, because had you have set the goal 20 years ago to be a professor, had you had that line of sight to your own possibility, your own vision for yourself. But 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of talk about your vision for yourself. No. These days, there's a lot more of self-development and professional development available to younger people coming through. But I guess as we close off our conversation today, if there was one thing systemically that could be done to help more younger women come into university and take up engineering and computer science and the STEM degrees, what do you think would be the biggest factor to help more young women to be making those decisions?
That is a very difficult question to answer, because it is multifaceted, and you really have to start from early childhood and look at the entire pipeline. And I remember actually studying and looking at this question when I was director of Women in Engineering and IT in my faculty. And in my opinion, it starts from family, it starts from your childhood and how your parents sow the seed of science and love of science in your mind. Then I think the environment and the community and the school plays a very important role. And I think really the education system needs to be changed from kindergarten all the way to end of school, because we do a lot of outreach at UTS to go to schools and help the girls understand what careers in this and that are like, etc., etc. But we go to high school and do this, and I think that a lot of kids that you need to sow the seeds when they're in primary, sometimes even in kindergarten. So I remember when my kids were little, I used to buy them toys that help them understand what's going on around them. We have to change a lot of these typical things that we have in society, stereotypical. For girls, you always buy dolls, and for boys, you buy cars and this. And I actually never bought any dolls for any of my kids, but I used to buy them toys that Lego, for example. I spend a lot of money on buying them Lego, because I used to think that Lego is a really, really good way of getting their brain in about making things, breaking things, putting them back together. And it takes a lot of effort. It's not just one thing, but I would say it has to start from early childhood.
Yes, the impact of those early words and beliefs and biases and attitudes, and then our teachers are not equipped. How do they know what the life of a data scientist or a software engineer or an AI technologist is about? They're coming in often with science from high school, and they're the teacher for science. This is where the outreach programs and different initiatives focus on highlighting careers in STEM and connecting scientists with schools and with students. And it is a long road, as you say. That's where I'm hoping that conversations like these can show different avenues and different ways of going, and that a a career in academia could be as rich and multifaceted as you have created it to be. So I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Didar, and there's so many tips, strategies, traits, and I can see a lot of those beliefs that have been sown into you from a young child have been very intrinsic to you. And now here you are creating that ripple effect for the next generation coming after you. So I do thank you for your service and your choices and for your time with me today. So if people want to contact you, where's the best way to get in touch with you, or they want to learn more about software engineering or life in academia? What would be the best contact for you?
So I do have LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. So those are the two social platforms that people can reach out to me. But also my UTS profile is public and my email address is in public domain as well. So certainly they can contact me through my university or through LinkedIn and Twitter.
Very good. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.